Tonight, we are traveling deep into the heart of China, but not for the history you see in textbooks. We're going somewhere older, somewhere that still follows rules. There is a legend whispered in the northern provinces that if you smell musk and wet fur in a room with no windows, you must never turn around. Because if you do, she already knows your face. Tonight, we explore one of the most enduring and unsettling entities in East Asian folklore, the Huli Jing, the fox spirit. This is not a cartoon animal. This is a shapeshifter, a master of illusion that wears a human face and drains the life force of the unsuspecting. And before this video ends, you'll understand why some people in China still leave offerings for something they cannot see. Our first story comes from a viewer named Chen, who went hiking in the Yellow Mountains and found something that wasn't on the map. I have always been an avid hiker. There is something about the Huangshan mountains that calls to me. The way the granite peaks pierce through the sea of clouds. It feels like a different world, separated from the noise of modern life. 2 years ago, I decided to take a solo trip during the off-season. I wanted isolation, but I got much more than I bargained for. It was late afternoon when the fog rolled in. It wasn't a gradual mist. It was a sudden, heavy blanket of white that reduced visibility to maybe 3 feet. I knew the trails well, or I thought I did, but after walking for what felt like an hour, I realized the stone steps beneath my feet had changed. They were older, cracked, and covered in a slick, dark moss that I hadn't seen on the main tourist paths. I checked my GPS, but the signal was dead. That is when I saw the lantern. A soft orange glow was flickering about 50 yards ahead. Relieved, I pushed through the fog and found a small wooden pavilion. It looked ancient, like something out of a period drama, with intricate carvings on the pillars. Sitting there, pouring tea, was a woman. She was stunning. She wore a traditional hanfu, white with red embroidery, which was strange for a hiker, but I assumed she was part of a photo shoot or a performance for tourists. She looked up at me and smiled. Her eyes were incredibly dark, almost swallowing the light from the lantern. She gestured for me to sit. The air around the pavilion was warmer than the freezing mountain air. She didn't speak, just pushed a porcelain cup toward me. I was cold and exhausted, so I sat. The tea smelled floral, like jasmine, but with an underlying scent I couldn't place. It was musky, earthy, like a wet animal. I thanked her and took a sip. It was delicious. I asked her if she knew the way back to the cable car station. She just pointed a long, slender finger into the darkness behind the pavilion. That was when I dropped my phone. It slid off the stone table and fell under the bench she was sitting on. I bent down to retrieve it, and my blood turned to ice. The lantern light was casting shadows on the ground. I saw the shadow of the table. I saw my own shadow. But where the woman's shadow should have been, specifically the shadow of her legs, there was nothing human. The shadow cast against the stone floor was not of 2 legs and a dress. It was a single, thick, bushy shape, a tail. And it was swaying, even though the woman was sitting perfectly still. Before I continue, pause for a second. If you're still here after that reveal, if you're the kind of person who doesn't click away when the shadow doesn't match the body, then you already belong here. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next story that follows you home. All right, let's go back to Chen. I froze. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the Huli Jing, spirits that take human form to eat the liver or drain the qi of men. She said their tails are the hardest thing to hide. I grabbed my phone and sat up, trying to keep my breathing steady. The woman was still smiling, but her smile looked wider now. Too wide. It stretched unnaturally across her face, showing too many teeth. "I have to go," I stammered. I stood up, my legs trembling. She didn't blink. She just tilted her head, and for a split second her eyes flashed a luminescent green. A low, guttural growl vibrated in the air, not coming from the woods, but from her chest. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the slippery moss or the fog. I sprinted blindly into the mist. Behind me, I heard a sound that haunts me to this day. It wasn't a scream. It was a high-pitched, yipping laughter that sounded like a fox and a crying baby mixed together. I ran until my lungs burned, and I collapsed onto a paved road. A park ranger found me an hour later. He told me there was no old pavilion in that sector, just steep cliffs. When I got back to the hotel, I looked in the mirror. A patch of my hair, right above my right ear, had turned completely white. I never went back to the mountains. And sometimes, when it rains, I can still smell that musk in my apartment, even though I live on the 20th floor. That was Chen's story. Our next account comes from a university student in Nanjing who thought he had met the perfect girlfriend until he saw what she ate when she thought he was asleep. Living in a dormitory can be suffocating. So when I matched with Lee on a dating app, I was thrilled to have a reason to go out. Lee was beautiful, quiet, and mysterious. She told me she lived with her grandmother in an old neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. We dated for about a month. Everything was perfect, except for a few oddities. She never ate when we went out to dinner. She would order food, push it around her plate, and say she wasn't hungry. She also had a strange aversion to dogs. If we walked past someone walking a dog, the dog would go crazy, barking and snapping at her, and she would hide behind me, trembling. One rainy Tuesday, she invited me to her place for the first time. It was in a very old part of Nanjing, a maze of narrow alleyways and crumbling brick houses. Her house was dark, lit only by candles because she said the electricity was out. She told me her grandmother was asleep in the back room, and we had to be quiet. We sat on the couch, watching a movie on my laptop. Around midnight, I drifted off to sleep. I woke up a few hours later with a terrible thirst. The room was pitch black. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, trying to find the kitchen. As I stood up, I heard a wet, tearing sound coming from the kitchen area. It sounded like someone chewing with their mouth open, snapping bones. I thought maybe a stray cat had gotten in. I crept toward the doorway and shone my phone light into the kitchen. The light beam cut through the darkness and landed on Lee. She was crouched on the floor, not standing. She was hunched over the open refrigerator, but she wasn't eating leftovers. She was holding a raw, whole chicken that looked like it had just been plucked. Her face was buried in the carcass. When the light hit her, she snapped her head up. Her face was smeared with blood, but it was her eyes that made me drop the phone. The pupils were vertical slits. Her jaw was unhinged, hanging lower than humanly possible to accommodate the meat. And her skin, it was rippling. Patches of white fur were sprouting along her cheekbones and receding just as quickly. She hissed at me. It wasn't a human sound. It was a warning. I scrambled back, tripping over a rug. As I fell, I looked toward the back room where she said her grandmother was sleeping. The door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw a small shrine. There was no bed, no grandmother, just a dusty altar with a statue of a nine-tailed fox and a bowl of fresh blood. I didn't wait for her to explain. I ran out the front door, barefoot, into the rain. I navigated the maze of alleys until I found a main road and hailed a taxi. The driver looked at me like I was insane, covered in sweat and shaking. I blocked her number. I moved out of the dorms. I thought it was over. But 3 days ago, I received a package at my new address. There was no return label. Inside was a raw chicken bone, clean and white, wrapped in a lock of black hair, and a note that just said, "You still owe me dinner." Our final story didn't end with escape. It ended with inheritance. My grandfather was a very wealthy man. He owned factories, land, and half the real estate in our town. But he was also a sickly man, always pale, always tired. He died young, at 55. My father refused to talk about him, and he refused to touch the inheritance. He lived a modest life and died of old age. When my father passed, the inheritance fell to me. I was struggling with debt, so I didn't have the luxury of refusing. I took the keys to the ancestral estate, a massive courtyard house in the countryside that had been empty for decades. I moved in to renovate it and sell it. The first night, I found the sealed room. It was in the west wing, the doors pasted over with yellow Taoist talismans that had faded with time. Being young and skeptical, I tore them down. I thought they were just superstitious junk. Inside, the room was pristine. No dust. It was furnished like a bridal chamber, with red silk curtains and a large antique bed. On the vanity table sat a wooden comb and a small copper mirror. That night, I had a dream. A woman in red walked into my room. She told me she had served my grandfather, and now she would serve me. She said she could give me the world as long as I let her stay. I woke up feeling drained, like I had run a marathon, but I chalked it up to stress. The next day, my luck changed. I got a call from a buyer offering double the asking price for a piece of land I was trying to sell. Then, I found a bag of gold coins buried in the garden. Within a month, I was rich. But the dreams continued. Every night, the woman came to me. She was beautiful, intoxicating. In the dream, we were lovers. But every morning, I woke up weaker. My skin turned gray. My hair started falling out in clumps. I went to doctors, but they found nothing wrong. They said I was aging rapidly, but they didn't know why. One night, I decided to set up a camera in my bedroom. I wanted to see if I was sleepwalking. The next morning, I watched the footage. I wish I hadn't. At 3 a.m., the door to my room opened, but no one walked in. Instead, a mist flowed over the floor. It swirled around my bed and solidified. It formed the shape of a woman, but her limbs were twisted, and she had a long, bushy tail that wrapped around my sleeping body. She climbed on top of me. She placed her mouth over my mouth, but she didn't kiss me. She inhaled. I could see a faint, white vapor leaving my lips and entering hers. As she fed, her skin glowed, becoming more youthful, while my body on the tape visibly withered. She looked directly at the camera lens. She smiled, and then she mouthed the words, "You are almost finished." I tried to leave the house. I packed my bags. But when I got to the gate, I couldn't open it. I physically couldn't make my hands turn the lock. I tried to climb the wall, but my body wouldn't obey. I am a prisoner in my own home. I realized then why my father refused the inheritance. He knew. I am writing this from the study. She is in the next room. I can hear her humming a lullaby. She is waiting for nightfall. She is waiting to feed. I know I am going to die in this house, just like my grandfather. The wealth was never a gift. It was the bait, and I have swallowed the hook. So, what exactly is the Huli Jing? In Chinese mythology, the fox spirit is a complex creature. They are not ghosts, but animals that have cultivated spiritual energy or qi over hundreds of years. Legend says that for every 100 years a fox lives, it gains a new tail and new powers of shapeshifting. When it reaches 1,000 years and 9 tails, it becomes a celestial fox. However, the path to power requires energy. In many stories, like the ones we heard tonight, the quickest way for a fox to gain this energy is to steal it from humans. This is known as kaibu, the art of plucking to replenish. They seduce humans to absorb their yang essence, the masculine life force, to balance their own yin nature. The scariest part of the lore is that once a connection is made, it is incredibly difficult to break. The fox spirit creates an illusion of love and success that is hard to resist, even as it kills you. Is there a rational explanation for these encounters? Of course. In the case of the hiker, high-altitude cerebral edema, or simple exhaustion, can cause vivid hallucinations. The brain, deprived of oxygen and sensory input in the heavy fog, begins to create patterns, pareidolia, turning a shadow into a tail or a rock into a woman. For the student in Nanjing, sleep paralysis is a likely culprit. Seeing a figure eating or sitting on your chest is a classic symptom of the condition, often accompanied by feelings of dread and auditory hallucinations like chewing or growling. As for Zhang in his inheritance, the stress of sudden wealth combined with the suggestive power of local superstition can manifest as psychosomatic illness. If you believe you are cursed, your body can literally shut down from the stress, mimicking the symptoms of being drained. But across Asia, there are thousands of shrines built to appease fox spirits. You don't build shrines for hallucinations. You build shrines for something that answers back. So let me ask you something. If you woke up tomorrow richer, luckier, desired by someone impossibly beautiful, how long would it take before you realized something was feeding on you? And if you saw the tail in the shadow, would you run? Or would you stay for the tea? Tell me in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe now. Because next time, the shadow might not stay behind you. It might sit beside you. Good night.